Hello, and thanks for joining us again at the Unidentified Celebrity Review. It's a big show to kick off a big week. Michael Mataluni is back. The rumors of the extraterrestrial escape were false. Luis Jimenez is, of course, here as well. Your iconic host will be back together, live in just a few minutes. But first, I wanted to share some thoughts. It does seem the stigma around UFOs is diminishing. We now have top scientists, people like our guest today, Paul Davies, publicly involved in the search for such objects. Prominent government officials are no longer scoffing at the notion of ET presence. Got to get the music right here. Sorry, one second. But the whole thing it's unlike anything we've ever seen before, and it's worth asking, why is there a stigma in the first place? Throughout history, the notion that we are not alone in the universe seems to be the norm rather than the exception. The history of Western science is no exception either. Famed 17th century astronomer Johannes Kepler deduced that with the highest degree of probability, Jupiter is inhabited. 19th century astronomer Joseph Lithgow and mathematician Carl Gauss believed the moon was inhabited by aliens and planned on signaling them by digging giant ditches in the Sahara Desert, filling it with kerosene, and lighting it on fire. In 1938, belief in Martians was so widespread that Orson Welles' radio broadcast of War of the Worlds sent off a nationwide panic. So, why has our belief not only tampered off, but a stigma built up around the issue? Well, there's likely many causes. For one, our telescopes and sensors get better, but we are still without concrete proof of these things. I'd argue, though, it's because we stopped looking. The government officially stopped looking in 1969, closing down Project Blue Book and telling the public that UFOs are just hoaxes and misidentifications. It seems the whole existence of Project Blue Book was to influence the public to dismiss UFO sightings, to build up a stigma. And although it can be frustrating to look at the decades of progress lost, the silver lining is that the stigma is artificial and eliminated through logic. The Fermi paradox, which asks, why have we not seen aliens here, remains unsolved and as pertinent as ever. Now, I'll be examining some of those social manipulations around the topic, particularly when it comes to Marvel Comics, in an upcoming video on my channel, Rather Be Squiddy. Head on over there to subscribe. But first, speaking of unsolved mysteries, the case of the mysterious hacker person on Luis's Patreon is ongoing. Find the link in the description and learn more about that and get a sneak peek at some cool upcoming UCR merchandise. If you're able to give a couple dollars a month, please consider joining the Patreon and helping this show do what it can to eliminate UFO stigma. And to that end, let's not keep all the 61 of you in the live chat waiting any longer. You've been missing their witty banter, and let's wait no longer. Your hosts of the Unidentified Celebrity Review, Luis Jimenez and Michael Mataluni.
Hey,
how's it going,
guys? What is shaking? You know what I just realized? I forgot to send Jazz Shaw an invite to the show. Yep. Oops. Damn it. Sorry. I was doing a whole bunch of last minute stuff here, taking care of some personal things in the house, but I just sent him the invite, so he should be here shortly, and hopefully we'll be able to get him in here to ask some questions as well. Rather, what happened to your music side today, buddy?
Yeah, I don't know. I was doing my intro, and then I heard two musics, and mine must have died or something. Sorry about that.
Oh, interesting. No, weird. For some reason, I saw it play. Anyway, we'll figure it out after the show. Rather, thank you so much for being here, and thanks for covering for this guy last week. Really, you should be thanking him, Michael.
I will continue to do so, because thank you for let me take a vacation. It was fantastic. And to address the rumors in the room.
Oh wait, Michael,
maybe I wasn't abducted, but it was definitely an interesting experience. Maybe I'll share it with you later. So.
Oh well, that would be cool. But real quick, because you have been on vacation, you forgot to turn on your microphone.
Oh dear.
Yeah, so that's okay. It's those return to work jitters, I guess.
Does that sound gorgeous now?
Way better. Oh my God, so much better. So much better. All right, Rather. Well, we'll see you in a little bit because I'm definitely going to get you in here for Paul Davies because I know you're going to have a ton of questions for this gentleman. So don't worry, my friend. We'll bring you back in a second, okay?
Sounds good.
Michael!
I'm so stoked. I'm so excited. Dr. Paul Davies is an extraordinary guy. I had the pleasure of interviewing him once before, and his background, his experience, his knowledge is just bar none. And the fact that he's joined the Galileo Project is something quite extraordinary. So you guys are in for a real treat today. Luis, how are you, man? I missed you, brother.
Whew. It's been a long week, Michael. Very, very, very long week, but
I know it, brother.
Finally starting to see a little bit of progress, starting to see the light at the end of the tunnel.
Speaking of lights at the end of the tunnel, you see my new light back there?
I do. Yeah, it looks great. Looks great. Yeah. Oh, it's like a Knight Rider thing. Very cool. And your name's Michael, so all you need is a voice box, and this you can have your house talk to you, like, and then you can go solve crimes.
We're close, but I'm always nice to Siri. I'm always nice to Alexa.
Always treat the AI like a human. That's gonna be my advice to everyone. You never know. Hello, good morning, good evening, good day, good afternoon, and aloha. Welcome back to another episode of the Unidentified Celebrity Review, your home for credible news, reviews, and commentary on everything UAP and UFO. My name's Luis Jimenez. That is my co-host, Mr. Michael Mataluni. We're finally back together again. The team is back. The boys are back in town, as they like to say. Before we get started, of course, I want to say thank you to the sponsor, BlueMarlinChronicles.com, purveyors of the world's finest fishing tackle since 1995. I want to say thank you to DOS Tapes. They provide all of the tunes that you hear on the show. Their Bandcamp link is in the description below. Michael, without further ado, let's bring in our guests.
Absolutely.
Real quick before we do, I'm sorry. We just gotta, we gotta get back on the same page here, Michael. It's been a week. Jazz Shaw just asked, should we bring him in for this first hour? Or should we save Jazz for the second hour?
Wait, I don't know. Is he here? Is he in the?
No. Well, he's asking me. I just sent him the link. He thought he was coming in for second hour. You know what, Jazz? You thought you were coming in for second hour? Wait for second hour. We'll bring you in second hour. Let's do that. Worries. Awesome. Hey, what's up, Christina? So happy to see her face in the chat. Thank you guys so much. Thank you all that have shown all the love, all the support. Don't forget the Patreon. Don't forget the Super Chats. Michael, introduce our guest. Let's do this.
Absolutely. So for those of you who don't know, our guest today is an English physicist, writer, and broadcaster, professor at Arizona State University, and director of Beyond Center for Fundamental Concepts in Science, also a member of the advisory board of Harvard's The Galileo Project that was announced earlier today. I'm so excited to introduce you to the one and only Dr. Paul Davies. Welcome.
Thank you.
Yeah,
welcome,
it's wonderful to have you. Oh, sorry, I got a little bit of lag.
Oh,
can you hear me okay, Paul?
Yeah. I can hear you fine, yes.
Okay, great. Awesome.
Fantastic.
Well, Paul, it is an absolute pleasure to have you here today. That is for sure. You had a really big announcement today with the Galileo Project. We're going to get into that in a couple minutes. It's definitely one of the reasons I wanted to have you, because finally science seems to be, I don't want to say catching up because I don't want to insult anybody, but it's nice to have science starting to join the conversation, at least on this side of the fence. We're not believers. We try to be as skeptical as possible. We try to add as much science to the data as we can, and it's nice to just have someone in the fight with us that could bring some credibility to the discussion, bring some different perspectives, and hopefully maybe a couple of answers. So appreciate you being here. But before we do that, real quick, if you can, for everyone who's new in the audience, who's not familiar with Paul Davies, what he does for a living, where he teaches, all of the fun things that he gets into, if you can explain to our audience a little bit about who you are.
Right. Well, as you mentioned, I'm British by birth. I worked in London and Cambridge and Newcastle upon Tyne. I'm a theoretical physicist by training, but my interests extend to what we call astrobiology. I moved to Australia in 1990 and lived there until 2006 when I moved to Arizona to take up the position as director of the Beyond Center for Fundamental Concepts and Science at Arizona State University, where I'm a Regents professor. So basically, I'm a physicist, but I'm also a long-standing supporter of SETI, the Search for Extraterrestrial Intelligence. I would describe myself as an open-minded skeptic. I think at this particular time we have no evidence whatever for any life beyond Earth, let alone intelligent life. But it's important that we think about these things and that we look as best as we can, so long as our budgets allow. I'm also the author of 31 books, and the one probably most relevant to the subject today is The Eerie Silence. And it was written in 2010 for the 50th anniversary of the founding of SETI, the Search for Extraterrestrial Intelligence, which began using radio telescopes in 1960, and 50 years on, just an eerie silence. And so I wanted to review, maybe we were looking in the wrong place, for the wrong thing at the wrong time. I wanted to review what they've been doing, but also to broaden the discussion and suggest new ways in which we might push the search for extraterrestrial intelligence forward. So that's basically my background.
That's fantastic. Can you tell us, I'm very curious, Paul, what attracted you to the Galileo Project? Obviously, you know, Avi Loeb is somebody, he's actually leading the organization, but I'm very curious, what brought you to it? I mean, obviously, you've been interested in this topic for a very long time. You're passionate about it. You're also very skeptical. You're also somebody who has an open mind. Can you tell us what specifically opened you up to this project and to work with Avi?
Well, Avi and I have been part of the breakthrough projects, which have been going on for a number of years now. This is a big boost to SETI, the Search for Extraterrestrial Intelligence. I have to keep saying that in case people don't know what the acronym is. And this has been funded by Yuri Milner, who put $100 million into standard radio telescope SETI, and then further $100 million into other aspects. And Avi and I and a number of other distinguished scientists are on the advisory board for how to best use that money. And so I've known him for a number of years through that project, and this is closely related. And I suppose what attracted me is that it's a very frustrating subject, as I'm sure people listening to us know. It goes back to, in the modern era of what we might call UFOs or UAPs, goes back to 1947. And whole decades went by, frustrating all these reports and so on. And I became interested just when I was at high school, way back all those decades ago. And it just seemed to me at that particular time, there are all these reports, and yet the physical evidence seemed so pathetic, just blurry photographs, movie film that looked like it had been rigged. I mean, really nothing much. And I suppose what went through my mind was that with advances in technology that may occur in the coming decades, we really ought to be able to nail this. We ought to be able to get absolutely definitive evidence one way or the other. Is our planet being visited by extraterrestrial beings or probes or technology? Is there non-human technology on Earth or close to Earth? We ought to be able to settle that. And given that there's a very large number of phenomena that get mistaken for alien spacecraft, we ought to be able to figure out what they are as well. But really, in the intervening decades, very little change. The photographs are just as blurry. It all looks a little bit pathetic. And so I'm attracted to the idea that we do a proper job. Let's try and cover the planet with a network of really good sensors. Let's get good images and other physical traces of anything that might be in the atmosphere that we should know about. Let's try and do this once and for all and settle the matter. And so I think it's really great that the Galileo Project is doing this. And I think it's also great that they're not going to pick over the cold cases. It's not going to look back at the famous Lubbock lights or the Lakenheath cases and things I paid a lot of attention to when I was much younger. There's no point going back over that. It's really, let's try to get good evidence from here on.
Wow, that's amazing. Yeah, go ahead, Lou.
No, well, I was going to ask: are there any intriguing aspects to the data collection? Anything specifically? Any measurement tool or any device that you're looking forward to see what the data brings in?
Well, at the moment, the emphasis is on just very good optical images by building modest-sized telescopes dedicated to just covering the sky. I think we would all like that to be coupled with infrared and radar records as well. That could be a rather expensive undertaking, and all this has to be worked out. If we could just get some really clear physical evidence, and by physical evidence I don't mean a chunk of metal on the ground necessarily. I mean good images, good traces from radar, infrared, or other wavelengths, and be able to analyze them in detail. I think there are a lot of interesting atmospheric optical effects we don't fully understand, and so that's one thing that excites me. I've always been interested in the subject of ball lightning, which is a little bit mysterious. This is not fully explained. I'm sure there is a good explanation within known physics, but we haven't really got it yet, and I think could help with that effort as well. So there are a number of things I think that can be done, but this is what I should stress is that this isn't an attempt to go back and sort of validate past stories, anecdotes, reports. It's saying we'll forget about all that, and from here on we will try to get really good evidence and not just rely on eyewitness testimonies or military records, which are subject to censorship anyway.
Well, it's funny. You mentioned known physics, and we had a question from somebody on Twitter that said that they had caught the announcement on the podcast today, and they mentioned something about focusing on the known physics aspects of things. Does that mean that if you catch something outside of the laws of physics or breaking the laws of physics, are you going to ignore it, or is it something that you're going to sort of lean into because that's where the data is going?
Now, I strongly support this idea of remaining within the framework of what we know, because otherwise anything goes. And I made this very clear in my book, The Eerie Silence, that of course we make judgments like you can't travel faster than light because our best understanding of physics says that is the case. Once you relax all the rules, well, then it becomes just telling fairy stories. It's not science at all. We have to have a framework.
Yeah, speaking of the faster than light travel, what are your thoughts on things like the Alcubierre warp drive, the kind of the fringe topics that say it might be theoretically possible?
Yes, it's not really strictly faster than light travel. It's within the framework of the general theory of relativity. That it's a statement, nothing can travel faster than light, is just a very loose and informal statement. It has to be made more precise. The problem with that warp drive you were just referring to is that it would require such stupendous amounts of energy. I mean, basically, it's like saying, well, it takes a long time to fly from the United States to Europe, a few hours. Well, we could shorten that time if we reconfigure the globe and drag Europe close to the United States, and then we could get there very quickly. What's the point of doing that? And so I don't think, personally, I should declare my position. I think it's exceedingly unlikely that any of the reports of UFOs or UAPs represent extraterrestrial visitation. Whatever they are, I don't think that is it. Obviously, there's a mixed bag of phenomena, some of which we understand well. I myself have been involved in explaining a number of cases, and it's extraordinary how easy it is for people to misperceive things that they see in the sky. And so there are a lot of things that I think we do understand, which would explain many of these reports. Some things we don't understand. We may find new atmospheric phenomena, new physical phenomena. We may, who knows, we've got to be open to the possibility that there could be extraterrestrial technology in not just on Earth, but in the solar system. We shouldn't just restrict our search. I'm a strong advocate that we should be looking in the elsewhere in the solar system as best we can. Not because I think we're going to find anything out there. I think it's still a huge long shot. But if it doesn't cost much to look, why not? Who knows what you will find?
Right. I find it interesting. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, rather.
Well, I guess I'm kind of curious why you think it's such a long shot. Is it because we haven't seen evidence, concrete evidence, which is surely the case? But, the Fermi paradox kind of assumes that we probably should be seeing aliens, right? And it's kind of a mystery why we're not.
Right. So that's the thing, that our planet has been here for about a third of the age of the universe. There could have been stars and with planets having life and even intelligent life long before Earth even existed. And so if ET wanted to come here, well, why wait so long? At any time over the past few billion years, this planet could have been visited or even colonized by extraterrestrial civilizations. If they're out there, that could have happened. Well, why would they come now, just suddenly as we're getting interested in the subject? So
yeah,
I'm pretty skeptical about this, because I think it would have happened a long time ago. I think Fermi was right. If they're out there, and if they spread, then they would be here already. Of course, we can imagine a universe that has a lot of life and very little intelligent life. We can imagine a universe that has lots of intelligent life, but they simply stay where they are and don't spread out. The distances are vast. You'd have to have very good motivation for going. So I think there are all these reasons why.
Potentially, maybe a long shot, but maybe they're already here and have been here for a while. They're just really hard to find, and it takes a project like the Galileo Project to detect them.
Yeah, this idea that they're sort of hiding in plain sight, or the cosmic zoo hypothesis, and so on. I just don't think there really is any very good evidence for that, and so I'm pretty skeptical on that one. I mean, you can make up any number of stories as to what is going on, of course. If you wanted to, you could say, oh, these are just time travelers from the future, and they just, come and look for a few minutes and then go back to the future. It's impossible to know, and I think we have to keep our feet on the ground. And the first thing to do is get proper scientific evidence, and not just rely on eyewitness testimonies. Look, I want to make one thing absolutely clear, because don't get me wrong, people see things and they describe them, and they're unexpected and maybe unexplained. I'm not rubbishing those people. I'm not saying that people are crackpots or they make it up. I think most reports are genuine by people who are really puzzled and they deserve an explanation. I just don't think we're dealing with extraterrestrial visitation, whatever they are doing.
We've got a couple of super chats that I want to get to, but I have a quick question before we do that. You had mentioned earlier some pretty big numbers when it comes to the SETI project, $100 million, and understanding and trying to direct that money. Obviously, we're not there yet with the Galileo project. I think we've raised $1.75 million prior to launch today, and I know they're trying to attract bigger donors, and Avi wants to 10x that number. Do you think that's enough money when it comes to getting to the bottom of this mystery? Obviously, you're skeptical as to what it is. You're very much leaning away toward it being extraterrestrial, but whatever it is, and I love the fact that regardless of what it is, you're about finding the truth and finding answers, and that's just as fascinating as anything. That being said, do you think we got enough money, and are you concerned about the possibility? Because obviously SETI, we spent all this money looking for radio waves, and here we are with this eerie silence, as you wrote in your book. Are you concerned that we're going to spend this money on this, and we're maybe looking in the wrong direction? Like, how do we make sure we're looking in the right places with the right tools?
Well, I think in a way, Project Galileo is a better bet than traditional SETI, because we had no idea really whether there are any incoming radio messages. It seems extremely unlikely they'd be directed at us, and stumbling across a random message, we just don't have the power in our radio telescopes to do that. And so, but the one thing we do know is that people see things in the sky. They see them all the time. May not be extraterrestrial visitors, but it certainly is intriguing. And if there are many reports, as most people believe, if we're talking about thousands and thousands of reports a year, then surely a system of good instruments is going to detect something. Whereas with SETI, you might search for 1,000 years and not pick up a radio signal. So I think from that point of view, we should detect something. But of course, covering the entire planet with quality equipment will take very much more than a few $1 million. But the secret usually with these projects is to combine it with something else. That there are, of course, lots of reasons to be looking at the sky in various wavelengths, and astronomers are doing this all the time. And so just as SETI can piggyback off other radio telescope projects, I think this Project Galileo could also combine with or piggyback off other observing programs.
Well, we got a $25 question from Jazz Shaw, who will be joining us in the second hour. And he asks, is the instantaneous transmission of data through quantum entanglement, as the Chinese seem to have claimed they have done, still impossible in current theory? So this idea of an Ansible, because that's sort of another one of the humps to get over of this idea of, going from galaxy to galaxy is, well, how do you communicate with home? How do you contact them? So that's a very cool question. What are your thoughts on that?
Yes, it's a very cool question and an infuriating misconception that we deal with all the time. The quantum entanglement does not, and let me repeat, it absolutely does not enable faster than light transmission of information. There's something called the no signaling theorem. It's part and parcel of quantum mechanics. It's a mathematical proof. You can't do it. What you're talking about with quantum entanglement, of course, people may not know what we are talking about, but you can have a couple of particles emitted from an atom, say 2 photons, go off in opposite directions like that, perform a measurement on this one, a measurement on that one at the same instant. And what you find when you compare the results afterwards is that there is a correlation between them, in excess of what could be explained with the classical view of physics, the idea that these photons already have some properties built into them in advance. So what you're finding is a correlation. Correlation is not causation. You can't do something over here and have an effect over there. So let's forget about that one. Quantum mechanics cannot provide either faster than light travel or even faster than light communication. It's a misconception, and it's out there. It's misinformation, and drives us mad.
Well, that's why we love having you on the show, so you can set straight stuff like that straight.
Well, I'm curious.
Yeah, go for it.
Can I dig deeper into that real quick? Because I want to make sure I understand this fully, because I think this is something that's really important that a lot of people misunderstood and understand, including myself. Okay, so quantum entanglement. So when you send these in different directions, when you send these, basically quantum entanglement is the spin of the electron, right? And so
there are any number of variables you can do it with, but one classic example, which was discussed in the 1950s, that's right, it would be to have 2 electrons emitted in opposite direction with spins, one spin up, maybe one spin down, something like that, and then perform measurements on those electrons, but at different angles. And that's where you see these weird, what Einstein called spooky action at the distance. You see these weird correlations in excess of what you would imagine if these were just like spinning tops or something.
Right. So what you're saying is the correlation is more often than random, but it's still a correlation?
Yes, it's not causation. You can't say, well, I'm going to do something to this electron and then that will have an effect on that electron. It's if you, somebody over here, somebody over there, independently makes measurements at various angles of the spin direction, and then you sit down together and you compare the results. You think, well, wow, that could not be explained if these were just standard classical physics, spinning tops, because even in classical physics, you would expect there to be a correlation between spinning objects emitted from the same position. The point is that in quantum mechanics, it's in excess of what you could find in classical physics, but it doesn't provide a means of signaling.
Right. So not random, not caused, but somewhere in the middle.
It's not even that. The point being that Heisenberg's uncertainty principle, which is the foundation of quantum mechanics, says that you can't know in advance when you make a measurement. Generally, you can't know in advance what result you're going to get. So it's not a matter of, well, I will choose to get this result here, then I know the guy over there must get that result. You can't do it because of uncertainty. All you could do is do the measurement. Oh, this is what I got. So now I know what he got. But it's no good because it's not I can't choose in advance to select a particular spin direction. So it's something that you can only tell after the event when you sit down together and compare the results. Right.
You can't prove causation. I got it.
Right. You can't. It's not a cause and effect. It's a correlation. And this happens all the time in science. People. It's one of the difficulties, particularly in sort of social science areas, to try to understand, well, is this really a cause or is it just, some sort of common effect? I'll give you a better example from physics where you can see it immediately. We've been talking about nothing can travel faster than light. Well, and I said, well, you've got to be a bit careful. So imagine I have a laser and I shine it at the moon, on the west side of the moon, and then I flip it in my hand. So it travels from the left side of the moon to the right side of the moon in a tiny fraction of a second. Well, that spot of light will cross the moon much faster than the speed of light. But of course, it's not conveying any information from the east side to the west side. It's simply a common cause, namely me shining the laser, that's connecting or correlating the information on both limbs of the moon. So that's one very simple example. Just swing a laser out, and there'll always be somewhere out there where that spot is moving faster than light. But the light itself isn't moving faster than light.
Right. Makes sense.
That makes sense. We do have another $25 question here from Thomas Wolf, and he says, thank you for the donation. Will this be international enough to provide global surveillance capabilities? How can individuals who aren't wealthy help buy equipment?
Yeah, that's a very good question. And of course, it has to be international because otherwise, how else are we going to make progress? I think it's going to boil down in the end to donations. And there's already a collaborator in Sweden. But of course, I would like to think that the subject of SETI generally, but also astrobiology and trying to understand what's going on in the atmosphere, that these things are of general concern, and it's important to build a network of collaborators. So I think the general public is really fascinated in this topic, but scientists are too. And the very fact we have this big astrobiology program, almost all of it directed to looking for signs of life well outside the solar system, not closer to home. But everybody is sort of fascinated. It's one of the fundamental questions of existence. Are we alone in the universe? Everyone wants to know the answer to that. And the difficulty is how to investigate that using science and not just philosophical or religious arguments. And that's an attempt to do that.
Well, I guess my question is, Doctor, is how do we juxtapose this in our minds? Like we've got our military, some of the finest, most highly trained folks on the planet. They're at the top 1% of the 1% of what they do. And they're locking on the objects. In some cases, these objects are actively jamming radar. They're moving in ways that they say break the known laws of physics. What do we do with that? I know it's not proof, but it's also not just one of these trained individuals. I mean, these are very highly trained folks coming from, the three letter departments in all of the right places of our government. And it's how do we take that information and add science to it and add a little bit of levity to it? What are you doing in your mind, I guess, to sort of sort of not get too excited about things, but still be able to look at these things and take these accounts and add them into the equation somehow.
Well, it's very difficult to collaborate with the military. A lot of what they're doing is classified information, and scientists generally, don't like to work with limited information. And so all we can go on is the reports which have been made and released to the press. Some of those reports, to me, suggest atmospheric effects. In particular, one pilot was talking about the object mirroring his motion as the plane moved around. And a mirror, to me, suggests an optical effect. There certainly are possibilities that you see something, and I'm not saying that the pilot was mistaken, only that the explanation lies with atmospheric effects. And there was one famous case from Britain way back when I was a teenager. I think I got interested in it. Somebody had taken some movie film from a plane, a commercial plane, showing a sort of disc-shaped object that suddenly shot away into the distance at enormous speed and then vanished. And this classic UFO story. And so a science news show decided to fly the same route and took a camera, and they wanted to see what was going on. And they discovered that from a certain angle, looking out through the window, the curvature of that window, the tailplane would appear as a little disconnected blob. And if you moved a little bit from one side to the other, that blob just sort of appeared to shoot away or change shape or vanish totally. And that was the explanation for that. And so misperceptions, I'm not saying that the Navy pilots, it's the same thing, but the point being that optical effects can be very dramatic, as we know from mirages. You see a mirage, it looks very convincing, very confusing. These things can occur, and it's simply not possible to say, well, let's take 500 reports from aircraft, and they're all due to mirages, they're all due to refraction effects. There are going to be a whole lot of different things. And I think Project Galileo is quite right in saying we're not going to go back and try and unpick all those and offer explanations. We will try to get better observations from here on. So when things like that are reported, you can say, well, we've got actually really good footage, and this is what it shows. So I think that's the way forward.
But you'd be open to looking at new and better footage, maybe that offers more data, or would the Galileo Project just not include it because it's not considered as part of their experiments?
Oh, I think if it occurs at the same time. So one idea that I'm attracted to is to work with air traffic controllers, civilian air traffic controllers. They're monitoring the skies all the time with radar, and from time to time they'll say, well, there's an unidentified object. They have to be sure that they know what they're doing because they're all planes colliding with each other. So these guys are already on the case. And if it were the case that they were to spot some particular trace of something that was behaving peculiarly or was unidentified, and there was a Project Galileo instrument in the vicinity, then you could cross-correlate those. So that's the sort of thing that I feel would be great in the future. And so instead of saying, well, there was yet another mystery object picked up by radar, then it vanished and so on, we'll say, well, here it is, and we've got a quality image, and try to figure out what caused it.
Mm-hmm. We appreciate you sharing that with us. And I have another very specific question regarding that. But before we do that, I just wanted to make sure we reset the room quickly. For those of you just joining us, we are joined by Dr. Paul Davies today. He's an English physicist, writer, and broadcaster professor at Arizona State University and director of Beyond Center for Fundamental Concepts in Science. He's also a member of the advisory board of Harvard's The Galileo Project that was announced earlier today. Thank you again, Paul, for being here so much. We really appreciate it. For those of you just joining us, make sure you click the subscribe button, share this out so we can get this in front of more people so we can get more of you in the Chatterverse. We appreciate your time. All right, so my question is this. what specific instruments, what specific, what's the game plan for Project Galileo? What instruments do we need? What sort of timeline are we looking at? Where do you see this headed in the next maybe 6 months to a year?
Well, at this stage, the funding will only pay for a rather modest number of telescopes, which we're not talking about enormous astronomical type telescopes, just something third of a meter or meter maximum. But nevertheless, good quality instruments. But these days, it's not good enough to have great optics. In addition to that, you need data processing of very high caliber. And so you have to collect the data from these instruments and process them and couple them together. You'd hope in the end to have a network of these things. And so this is very early days. I don't expect anything really dramatic in the next 6 months, I'm afraid. But by, as it were, throwing down the gauntlet, I think Project Galileo is saying, look, there are a lot of scientists around the world, some of whom have access to good instrumentation. And if we form a network and join together, and over time, we'll be able to build up a systematic picture. I said earlier, if there's thousands and thousands of these reports of weird things in the sky, surely it won't be too long before one of these instruments gets some good pictures of those, and then we can move it forward. It may be that there'll be 100 different reports and 100 different pictures and 100 different explanations. I'm not,
right.
Not saying there's a one-size-fits-all explanation, but they're all mirages or all hallucinations.
Right. Well, and you also have, as you were talking about the Tic Tac event with David Fravor as well. We mentioned one of these aspects where he thought the object was mirroring them. There was another part of that entire scenario where they both saw it from different directions, and they saw it do some very strange movements that they couldn't explain as well. So not only do you have different potential issues looking at these things from different incidents, but you also have debunkers explaining things that they're parts of events. And I think that's one of the hardest things when it comes to this is, debunkers will often find, okay, well, this you can explain this by it being an atmospheric phenomenon, or you can explain this, but they don't look at the whole picture. So I'm really excited that you guys are going to be looking at this. You're looking for new data. You're looking at the whole picture instead of trying to debunk individual pieces of a specific story.
I mean, this is not a debunking exercise. This is an attempt. But I said earlier that I'm an open-minded skeptic, and that's the way you have to approach this. Open to all possibilities, not just trying to get better instruments so we can rubbish what people are talking about, but to try to understand from as best a scientific point of view as we can what might be going on in the atmosphere and in the near space of the near environment of Earth. And then that melds into the more ambitious SETI program, which is largely directed at much greater distances, at looking for techno-signatures, as we now call it, in other star systems many, many light years away. And it's all part of a spectrum, and I think we have to consider it all. Why do we have to do that? Well, partly because it's just great fun. It's fantastic to think about. I got fired up by the whole UFO thing when I was a child. I thought this is amazing. Could it be that we've got aliens buzzing around in the atmosphere? I was thrilled with that idea. When I became a scientist, I realized it wasn't really quite that simple, and that this is a very subtle and complex subject, but I'm still interested in it all these years on.
Yeah, regarding kind of all possibilities, Zofa had a really interesting comment here. He says, simulations show that dust in a plasma can form replicating structures, and we recently discovered bacteria that can feed off electricity. If these things aren't alien, could UAP be naturally occurring colonies of these? Are things like that stuff you're considering?
Well, I think to regard them as having a biological explanation is probably a bit bizarre, but certainly plasma balls, there's this whole range of things. Let me just try and pick up on this, that everything from vague sort of lights in the sky at one extreme to alien abductions at the other, and all things in between. Many lights in the sky, I think, are ill-understood electromagnetic phenomena. Ball lightning, I mentioned earlier. It is a very strange phenomenon. You'll have a glowing sphere or a plasma. It might be only this big, or it might be much bigger. And these things sometimes come down chimneys and appear in people's houses, even in one famous case inside an aircraft. Quite how they form and remain stable is still not fully understood. I don't think there's any extraterrestrial aspect to this. I think it's an ill-understood atmospheric phenomenon. And it's important to understand because controlled plasmas are part of the nuclear fusion program. First got interested in it when I was doing my PhD. I was working with people wanting to have controlled fusion by confining plasmas magnetically, and they're notoriously unstable, and this is still a big challenge. And yet you can have these things bobbing around in the atmosphere. Evidently, nature has cracked the problem of keeping a plasma stable over seconds or even minutes in some cases. Really fascinating. So that's one extreme. Then we've got all the other stuff people see in the sky, and then we've got that whole alien abduction thing, which we haven't even touched on. What's going on there? If, as I say, I don't think our planet is being visited by aliens, well, what about all these stories of people being sort of snatched up in the middle of the night and having these levitating experiences and so on? And I think,
I gotta say real quick, Doctor, I just have to say this: the idea that the words alien abductions is even coming out of your mouth right now is like, I'd like that you're able to talk about it, even though we're skeptical. We have a lot of questions about it, but at least you're bringing it up. I think a lot of scientists in the past maybe would have just not even have touched the topic. So it's refreshing.
Well, John Mack almost got destroyed for it, right? I mean, he almost lost his license, right?
Yeah.
Well, but I mean, the point I want to make is I think that most of those cases are a phenomenon called lucid dreaming, and I have lucid dreams myself, in which I have many of the characteristics that people describe in these alien abduction stories. So again, let me repeat: that doesn't mean that the people who report these things are lying or crazy. I don't want to malign them, but these experiences can be very, very frightening. I had my first lucid dream at the age of about 18, and was a type of paralysis and a feeling of a malevolent presence in the room, and I thought I was fully awake but paralyzed. I've since come to understand about these characteristics of lucid dreaming, but many of the features that people describe in alien abductions do seem to fit that rather well. So you see what I'm trying to say? We've got things like ball lightning, we've got lucid dreams, and we've got a whole bunch of other things. It's not going to be a case of we can take all of the reports and disprove them all and say that, just debunk the lot. Won't be the case. There'll always be some weird things which we can't fully explain. But just because we can't explain something doesn't mean that it's aliens. We deal with this all the time. Like some people want miracles. Just because science can't explain something, then we need a miracle. Maybe we just need better science. And so there will be a residue of unknowns. There always has been, and there will continue to be.
In that category of weird things we can't explain, would you think maybe consciousness goes in there, or do you think that there's any hope that we'll be able to understand things like lucid dreaming and consciousness by scientific inquiry within our lifetimes?
Well, now, I think lucid dreaming is fairly well understood. At least it's much studied, and you can induce lucid dreams. In fact, I bought a device many years ago to try to trigger these lucid dreams because I find it a fascinating subject. But that's a big leap from consciousness generally. It's one of the great unsolved problems of science, and it's something we spend a lot of time doing research on in the Beyond Center at Arizona State University. We're interested in the nature of consciousness and the nature of life. What is life? What is consciousness? Consciousness is a very, very tough problem. There's a lot that is being written about, a lot that's being done on that subject. I think we're a long way from even being able to correctly formulate the right conceptual framework for stating what the problem is. So that's a really tough one, and I think it's a long way removed from weird objects in the sky, which is primarily what we're talking about here.
How do you, Doctor, in the Galileo Project, how will the hypotheses and then subsequent experiments be laid out? Do you guys have a process in place yet, or are you in the process of developing a process to identify hypothesis and then begin testing those hypotheses, or are we just purely in like just pointing things at the sky and gathering data? Like how are we going to approach this using the scientific method?
Well, Project Galileo isn't the beginning of the search for extraterrestrial.
Why haven't you found them yet, Paul? Why don't you know the answer? What's going on? It's been a whole for what, 6 hours? You guys don't have answers yet? What's going on? Pick it up over there at the Galileo Project, would you please?
But the point is that we've all had decades to think about, what would constitute good evidence. You have to use something called Bayes' rule. I tried to explain this in my book, The Eerie Silence, that sometimes people say, Carl Sagan famously, extraordinary claims demand extraordinary evidence. But a more careful statement is Bayes' rule, which is a way of assigning probabilities to different explanations. And so you might say, well, one explanation for this thing in the sky is an alien spaceship. Another explanation is some nonlinear electromagnetic phenomenon. And to properly evaluate that, you have to decide what is your a priori probability that you're going to assign to this. If we knew that the solar system was being visited by extraterrestrial beings, then any object in the sky, has a reasonable likelihood of being an alien spacecraft. But if you think, well, the chances of any sort of extraterrestrial technology being here is exceedingly low, then you would need very, very extensive additional evidence in favor of the extraterrestrial hypothesis.
Okay, I have a question. Well, it's a little bit of a pushback. I'm a little disappointed. And maybe you can explain this to where it just makes a little more sense for me. So this idea of if the Galileo Project, once all set up and able to gather data and analyze it in the proper sense and perspectives, this idea that if something is cataloged and recorded and measured that doesn't fit the known laws of physics, it will be, I guess, ignored or not looked at because it then opens up a can of worms that you can't scientifically tie things to. But then my question, or what I start to wonder is, well, do the laws of physics, they start to not really fit the smaller and microscopic scale that we get? The laws of physics seem to kind of go out the window when it comes to dark matter, dark energy, all of these things that we haven't even been able to see or measure, but they're scientific hypotheses. And then to think that these laws of physics are somehow going to stay the larger we get, the bigger we get on this scale. What do you say to that? Am I crazy in thinking that, or is that a decent pushback? I don't know. I'm not a scientist. What do you think?
Well, we would love there to be new laws of physics. There could be no greater excitement for a physicist than to find some sort of phenomenon that requires an extension of our current understanding. And the whole time, particularly in the realm of particle physics and cosmology, the boundaries of the existing laws are being pushed. We know they're not the last word. It's very clear, for example, the standard model of particle physics doesn't incorporate certain things we are certain about. For example, the existence of neutrino mass or dark matter, as you said. And so we clearly need to extend those laws of physics. These things come usually from very, very careful experimentation and statistical analysis. I think it's pretty unlikely we're going to come across anything fundamentally new just from looking at the atmosphere. But who knows? We might. And if it looks like there is some sort of phenomenon, I think it would be much more likely if something looks like it's defying the laws of physics, but it's not actually defying the laws of physics. It's just the assumptions that we're making about the nature of the object are probably not justified. And you see this all the time. And there, if I think back to my own attempts to investigate some of these cases, and I can just give you one example where at first sight it does look like the laws of physics have been violated. And this was some movie footage back in the days when it was done on celluloid film, movie footage near Stonehenge in the south of England, very sort of iconic site, of some strange lights in the sky that were sort of bobbing around and behaving as if they were defying the laws of physics. You know, what were these little blobs doing, moving sideways and so on, and then disappearing? It seemed very weird. And I was involved in investigating this, and I took a careful look at the footage and zoomed in. And then I saw immediately what these things were, because I'd seen the same phenomenon myself, been a bit puzzled by only a few weeks before. And these were military flares that are fired up above the cloud base, and they come down with little parachutes, and they're glowing, of course, but it's swaying in the wind, like falling leaves just from side to side. And when you zoomed in carefully on this footage, you could see the smoke trails behind. And when I questioned the witnesses, I said, well, how did you come to take this? I didn't give the explanation. How did you come to take this? And they said, well, we were camping near Stonehenge, and we saw these things every evening. And I said, well, that's amazing, because if it was that predictable, why didn't you get a bit closer and get some really good close-up photos? And the answer was, well, we tried, but there were these military maneuvers going on. But when I said, well, I think they're military flares, you see, they said, no, that wasn't the case. So this is the problem. Something that appears to defy the laws of physics turns out, on closer examination, to have an unusual explanation. I'm not saying that's a mundane explanation. How often do you see military flares coming down through the cloud base? But I have, and so I happen to know what that was.
What data point would you have to see to convince you otherwise? Like, what would you have to personally either witness, or what data would you have to look at to say, you know what, this is extraordinary? Doesn't necessarily mean it's extraterrestrial, doesn't necessarily mean it's, you know, future people or interdimensional beings, but just something that you say to yourself, you go, wow, this doesn't fit the current models, this is something special, it's a diamond in the rough.
Well, the great thing about Project Galileo is that it's going to go beyond the usual eyewitness testimonies, because it's infuriating that, you know, Mr. X saw this and described it this way, and Miss Y saw that, and then, you know, maybe there's some radar which doesn't quite fit and all the rest of it, and you're trying to put together a narrative around these data points, and it's really infuriating. But what you actually want is, of course, recorded quality data from more than one channel. It would not be enough to have a movie of some lights, you know, in the sky, and that's it. That could be almost anything. You would need to have triangulation on objects. You see, people are very, very poor. Let me ask a question. In fact, anyone who's watching now might like to think about this. So the first question is, you know, what is bigger in the sky, the sun or the moon? If you ask people that, most people say the sun, because you notice it more. And then you say, well, how can you have a solar eclipse if the moon is smaller than the sun? So they're about the same size. And then you say, well, how big is that? And in terms of something held at arm's length, you know, football, orange, coin, what is it? It's actually something about the size of a shirt button. And most people think, oh, yeah, it's much bigger than that. That's because we notice it. Right. Particularly when the sun or moon is rising down near the horizon, people think it's bigger than when it's above our heads. It's not. It's the same size. And so, you know, people are really, really bad when you say, how far away was it? How fast was it moving? And just basic things like the fact that a little object nearby is, you know, looks the same as a big object a long way away. And you say, well, how big was it? People say, oh, you're much bigger than a plane. Well, how far away was it? Well, they don't really know. And so, you can't build a scientific explanation based on eyewitness testimonies from genuine, nice people. I'm not saying that these people are idiots. I mean,
Right.
those people, keep coming back to that. I'm not rubbishing what people see.
Yeah.
But these are not scientific
Right.
observations. It's not scientific data. It's eyewitness testimony. So the Project Galileo is to try to get real instrument data that could be analyzed by other people. And then if we put that together, you were asking, well, what would it take? That would need to be put together in a way that really we could eliminate all of the obvious things that we know about the atmosphere. And then we'd be looking for possibly new phenomena. What would it take to convince me that intelligence was behind this? Now, and that's something we haven't actually touched. We've just been talking about something that behaves in such a weird manner that it must be ET at work. What is a signature of intelligence? So if there was a light in the sky that we could eliminate any sort of human technology, if we could do that, and if that light blinked on and off with the prime numbers, sequence of prime numbers, that's a signature of intelligence. I've heard of a report like that. You see, so that's one thing. You have to combine the unknown with something that has that we would associate with intelligence. It's not enough that it just does sort of weird maneuvers. It's got to be something which only an intelligent entity would know about.
Right. I think it's so important. And this is one of the things that I love about what the Galileo Project is doing, because it's so easy to spend so much time trying to pick apart these stories, of phenomena that we want to understand. But the hard part is getting out there and actually delivering hard data, and so that's one of the things that I think the Galileo Project is doing. I know we're approaching about the hour mark. Is there anything else like you really want to share with people? Like you think people maybe have misconceptions or need to understand or just don't know when it comes to A, what the Galileo Project is all about, and then B, what your approach is to studying UAP and potentially Oumuamua-like objects?
Well, I think we don't have enough time to talk about the Oumuamua type objects, interstellar visitors. That's a fascinating subject which interests me greatly, about extraterrestrial rocks, extra solar rocks coming into the solar system. But in terms of what my take-home message for the public is, look, I'm not just trying to put you down. If we're to get to the bottom of these many things that are going on in the atmosphere, many phenomena, some of which might be really interesting science, we need people to continue to report them in a careful manner. That anybody who sees anything unusual in the sky, try to be dispassionate about it, try to get accurate data. If you can get images, of course, that's good. But at the end of the day, a story, I saw this, I saw that, it was all very weird, is of no help at all. Try to be much more precise and continue to come forward and report those things.
Yeah, no, that's a wonderful point, and thank you for saying that. I mean, really, a big goal of this channel, something that we did a few months back, was called the Big Phone Home, and basically it was a call to action. We're trying to inspire as many people to call Congress, call their senators, call their local representatives, demand more transparency, more scientific data, more discussion, more openness with the American people on this topic, so we can start coming to our own conclusion. Maybe getting grants for institutions of learning or projects like these, public government grants, instead of giving $22 million to a secret, program that nobody gets access to the data. Why don't they give it to the Galileo Project? Why don't they give it to, any one of these wonderful projects that are now starting to form, because the conversation is being had, I think, at a congressional level, at a state level, and maybe even one day at an executive level. And so, we're going to be doing another call to action here in the next month. We're going to be announcing a date, and we would love to have as many scientific voices, because we're going to be devoting an entire day to scientific voices and making sure that the science of this phenomenon is discussed. And we'd love to have you back along with Avi Loeb and anyone else from the Galileo Project to discuss the Galileo Project. I would even love to get some guys, because I know a lot of folks in the Scientific Coalition for UAP Studies. Maybe we could get a little bit of cross action going here, sharing of some ideas, and just having some wonderful open-minded discussions. And I just wanted to also say thank you. Thank you for having the open mind. Thank you for having the courage to have the discussion, just to think about it. And that's all we're asking for. We're just asking for science to put this possibility on the table. Now, I agree with you. I mean, I'm a person who's had a personal experience, but I can't take my personal experience and lay it at the table of Congress. They're not gonna care. It's not scientific enough. It's not data driven enough. So I have to leave my personal stuff at home when I'm coming to the table here. And I think you've emphasized that very nicely. And I'm looking forward to seeing what the Galileo Project looks like in a year, let alone 5 years. And I'm hoping, fingers crossed, you guys get the SETI kind of money, like $100 million kind of money. And I hope that's coming soon.
Yeah, that's what we need. So,
Yes.
well, thank you for your support and for your interest. And incidentally, I'm really pleased we sorted out that quantum entanglement issue.
Yeah, indeed. I'm sure Jazz is also happy that you sorted that out. He's backstage, so we're going to get his thoughts on that answer in a moment. But yeah, again, Paul Davies, open door policy for you, sir. Anytime you want to talk about this project or anything else for that matter, you're a fascinating individual, and I can see why folks pay an exorbitant amount of money at a higher institution of learning to listen to you speak and learn from you. So, thank you so much for your time.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Paul.
Wow. Whew. That was fun.
Yes, absolutely.
That was a fun conversation. Let's reset the room, Michael. Let's tell everybody what we just did and what we're doing for the next hour. I would love to reset the room. Yeah. So for those of you just joining us, we just spoke with Paul Davies, who is at Arizona State University. He is on the board of directors for the Galileo Project. For those of you who don't know, the Galileo Project is being headed by Avi Loeb at Harvard University. They've raised $1.75 million. They're looking to 10x that to get the search for understanding of UAPs out of the hands of the military-industrial complex and into the hands of scientists, so we can actually gather some real data and make some real hypotheses and go get it. So much thanks to Mr. Paul Davies. Thank you, Lou, for always being here every single day on my show on Tuesdays and Thursdays. Make sure you check us out over at the Singularity Lab as well. Click the link in the description, because we're going to have Avi Loeb on tomorrow to discuss the Galileo Project. We've also got Rather Be Squiding right here, right now. If you love fringe science, if you love breaking technology, and you like a skeptical attitude, make sure you check out Rather Be Squidding. And we've got the one, the only, the man, Jazz Shaw, joining us right now. He is a writer and editor at Salem Media, as well as The Debrief, the legend. Welcome, Jazz.
Thanks, guys. Really enjoyed the conversation. That was a great interview.
Great tie as well, brother.
Oh, I can't see the tie because the chat's over it. Look at that. I love it.
I'll sit up a little higher. You know, everybody always wants a tie, so I'm going to wear a tie. You know.
I love it. Thanks for being so professional, Jazz. What did you think about the answer to your question?
Didn't like it at all, obviously. I've interviewed two different quantum physicists who had a really different take on it than the doctor did. They didn't say, "Oh, that's what happened," but they said this is a known unknown. Was basically the answer. Right. You know, the Chinese did absolutely send one data point from the surface of the Earth to a satellite instantaneously. It was faster than light. And I think we're still... I've done a few interviews with Deep Prasad, who's a quantum physicist, you know, and it's like, these are still known unknowns. I mean, these are things that people much smarter than me. I don't want to give anybody the impression that, oh, I've investigated this and I've done all the quantum physics. I have no idea. But there are a lot of scientists out there looking into this, and they're looking into what the Chinese did, and they're like, yeah, that makes sense. So I think we're on the cusp of new science that maybe it'll turn out the way Paul said. Maybe it'll turn out the way the people doing the experiments said. We don't know yet, but they've definitely done quantum entanglement. And it's really, I mean, we're getting out there onto the hairy edge of stuff that, Einstein predicted. So I don't know, but it does look like we could be on the edge of an Ansible. And Paul is clearly on the side. I don't know how old Paul is. He's older than me, I think. He's like, well, there can't be an Ansible. Ansible's not possible.
What is an Ansible?
So an Ansible is a device that allows you to communicate instantaneously from anywhere.
Faster than light, anywhere, without radiation, with no transmission in between, just taking one data point, another data point, could be 5 feet away, could be 5,000 light years away. When you make a change to the spin on the one element, it shows up instantaneously on the other one. If you can do that more than once, you have an Ansible. You can go ahead and transmit data. And it clearly sounds like Paul is still living in the world of the people who came way before the idea of quantum entanglement and Ansibles. And he's like, well, no, faster than light's not possible.
Well, yeah, I'll push back on that a little bit. That was one of the things that I did totally agree with Paul Davies, and I disagreed with him about a lot of things. But to my understanding, it is kind of like you can take that one atom in place A and the other atom in place B. If you measure it in place A, you know what is in place B. You know what the spin is going to be. But if you're at B, there's no way of telling if you ever looked at it in place A. So the real transferring actual information is still there. I don't see any real possible way to do that.
Okay, I like what Rather is saying, because I don't know that we have definitively proven that it happened. But at the same time, the people who are doing it, and like I said, I did interview 2 different quantum physicists who said that, yeah, that's within the realm of the whole Schrodinger's cat kind of thing. If you can't do it, let me throw this over to Rather. If you can't do it, the quantum entanglement is not real, right? It's a total falsity. It doesn't exist. But if it does exist, then I'm going to go back to Terry Pratchett, just to go to comedy, just to give a little levity to the show, who came up with a theory that you could have instantaneous transmission of information by torturing a king to death, because monarchy passes from the death of one monarch to the next, the son or whoever was the next one. And if we could just torture them till they're on the point of death, you could have quantum entanglement. Is that impossible? Because I'm sorry, Paul, the previous guest, really seemed to be very confident about that. But he's not speaking for the entirety of the science community. There are a lot of scientists who do not agree with that. And they believe that if quantum entanglement is possible, then Ansibles are possible.
But I think it's so important too, to speak to your point, Jazz, is that there are many interpretations of from theoretical physicists, right? They all write very different books.
Right.
So I think it's important to remember, exactly that, and I think that's why it's so important to have so many different scientists on this board at Galileo, right? I think the idea of having both skeptics, they're all skeptics, they're all scientists, right? But some are more, some are less.
Sure.
But I think it's so important to have so many different ideas, perspectives, and I think it's going to make for better science. It's going to make for better research. I think that's awesome. And then when it comes to like quantum entanglement, like I'm still trying to wrap my head around quantum entanglement and what it actually means, and fully understand the Heisenberg uncertainty principle, because what goes on in that black box, like it's a black box. Nobody knows what goes on in that black box. And I think there's so much information missing from theoretical physics that we don't have the answers to yet, that nobody, not me, but Paul is, well more trained than I am on this topic, but I guarantee that no human being has the full picture, and not even close.
Yeah, exactly, Michael. In one of your previous shows, one of your very recent shows, talked about, for example, the Hadron Collider. You were talking about people that had these weird theories, like, wow, if we collide these things at these speeds, could we be creating micro-miniature black holes? Right? Remember you were talking about that?
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah.
And
yeah.
Oh, and they could just like form, and if they don't escape the Earth, they could fall down into the center, and maybe we've already started consuming the Earth with these. The fact is, the best scientists we have don't have consensus on a lot of these things. And I don't think that the previous guest is the final word saying, oh, we already know this. And I don't think he said that. He didn't.
I mean, he seemed pretty confident.
Okay, he seemed pretty confident. But we could get a lot of other scientists on the show and say, no, we don't really know that yet, because we're really delving into some unknown territory, right?
Yeah, and I think a lot of that has to do with like your interpretation of quantum mechanics. I think like the mainstream quantum mechanics interpretation is kind of what Paul Davies was advocating. But you are right, Jazz. There are like the pilot wave interpretation of quantum mechanics states that there can be non-locality and literal faster than light communication with ansibles. But and there are real scientists who do, are behind that. There are a lot of these secrets that are still up in the air. Good point.
What I find curious is that's the point I rather agreed with him on, but he's like, I disagreed with a lot of other things. Rather, what did you disagree with Dr. Davies on? I'm curious.
Well, I disagreed on his premise when I was asking him about the kind of base assumption for life on Earth. I think that we should all be assuming there is life here. It's kind of arrogant for us to assume that we're alone in this solar system even. And it might even be arrogant for us to assume that if there was life here, we'd be able to detect it. So that was my main thing that I just
life or intelligent life, rather.
Either, but intelligent life. I'd say intelligent life.
But he
dolphins.
didn't say.
Just say dolphins.
Just say dolphins. I don't think he was making any sort of point about their. He's looking for intelligent life. I think he was speaking about intelligent life, not necessarily life.
And I think that's the Fermi paradox, is that if you assume that there's intelligent life is possible, and that Earth isn't the only one that it happened to, we should have intelligent life out there everywhere. And then if you accept the ability that you can do a von Neumann machine, that you could have a replicating space probe, they should be all over the universe. And that should be kind of our base assumption, that we should be seeing life. Why aren't we?
You're saying because of the Fermi paradox, we should be operating from the principle that there is and should be life, so that we can make a better hypothesis.
The weird thing isn't that we're seeing these UFOs. The weird thing is that we don't see them all the time.
Right.
So where are we getting the assumption that we don't see them all the time?
Well, that's
no, I wasn't making
that's a good point.
No, it's a good point. I mean, Christopher Mellon just said, today that
Isn't
they
that
had to
what
put.
we're gonna talk about?
Yeah, no, we're going to talk about that in a second. But they about how they had to put warnings up on ships and let these incoming aircraft know, hey, by the way, these are showing up every day. So be careful. Now, what those things are they drones? Are they, diamond in the rough kind of UAPs? Are they von Neumann machines? Are they interdimensional? Who knows? But the idea that they're telling the aircraft, hey, just keep an eye out because you don't want to hit one of these things on your landing approach. It's crazy. And no, I mean, like, that's why I was kind of pushing him on this idea of, well, if you guys measure something that doesn't fit into the physics box, like, why would we not look at that? Why would we not put it in the other box at least? Something that we can go back to, so if we see it again, we can say, oh, okay, we've seen that. Here's the data points on that.
Let me ask you this. Did you guys think he was saying that he would ignore data if it was operating outside the laws of physics and they just wouldn't look at it? Was that what he said?
That wasn't my take. My take was he was starting from a position like Neil deGrasse Tyson. We already know what's going on. The possibility exists that there may be new knowledge. And I don't find that a heretical thing to say. But we've got it locked down. We know how physics works. And this doesn't fit. That was what I took, from his explanations. And it's like, well, you're going to have to show me some really breakthrough, give me a whole new in-your-face set of data. That's fair from a scientific point, I want to say, to give him credit. But there are also a lot of scientists out there who are looking at these questions and examining things like, well, how can we measure neutrinos? How can we find dark matter? People asking a lot of questions about really weird stuff, and I think there are scientists that aren't so ingrained in the standard school. If we want to go back to what Lou Elizondo said, people that aren't afraid to be invited to look through the telescope. Mm-hmm. He sounds like somebody who's afraid to be invited to look through the telescope. That was just my take. I'm not a scientist.
Yeah, so. I got to give him credit because I do disagree with a lot of the things he was saying. I think that he is a little bit too skeptical on a lot of things, but he is looking through the telescope. He is in this project looking and trying to get more data. And I take him as his word. I think that if he did find some data that challenged his notion of physics, I think he would be excited and would look at that and would be, hey, let's figure this out.
Agree.
Well, I kind of took it as, because he said, well, if we take those data points, then and the data points don't fit with the physics, then, it's a gray area. It's like, how do we, it's like trying to grasp smoke, and so to take that data, it doesn't do them any good. It's kind of, and it also, he's like, it opens up a can of worms to like this pseudoscience because we can't measure it. We can't put numbers on it. We can't show the work, Well,
yeah, let's say that, David Fravor had actual camera footage of the Tic Tac that he saw, and we see something zipping away at a, impossible speed. My guess is that someone like Paul Davies would take a look at that, and it would take a lot to convince him that that was a physical object, even if you have camera evidence of it. He probably would think that it'd be a laser on the moon type thing. So,
I totally agree with Rather. Yeah, that's the impression that I got. The idea that he thought that quantum entanglement was not possible, or maybe theoretically possible from what he said, but not physically possible. It does seem like he was bringing a lot of assumptions, and I'm not criticizing him because he came up from an institutional system where he was educated and was said, no, that's not something that can happen. And I think he's older than me, and I'm pretty damn old, and he's heard that the whole time. And it kind of sounded to me a little bit like he was like, oh yeah, quantum entanglement's not possible. Well, but boy, there's a lot of quantum physicists that think that it is.
Well, so, I just want to say quickly, Yeah, no, I just want to say quickly, he didn't say that quantum entanglement was not possible. He said that it's a correlation, and we don't have any evidence because of the Heisenberg uncertainty principle that it's
Right.
causation. And so, yeah, that's as much as I know. Like, I don't, I'm not a physicist.
His theory is pretty much that you have like two double pendulums that you can start with the exact initial conditions. You can put them anywhere. You can look that now this pendulum is right here. You know that other pendulum is going to be right there too. But if you made a change to one of these pendulums, they're going to be out of sync. There's no information.
After the effect. Exactly. He's saying that you spin it when it's over here, it's not going to have an immediate correlation. It's not going to have any causation to what happens after over there.
But
that's
he
a really
agrees
good way of explaining that, rather. That was a really good way of explaining that.
Oh,
I feel like I know a little bit more.
That's it, rather. No, rather's not on that point. So what else did you disagree with him on, rather?
Yeah, I thought he was he was very, the academic world is very rigorous, right? Like you can't say something that you're not 100% behind. And I feel like he was very much a product of that. And he seemed almost like an odd choice to be on this project with, the 99% sure. I guess, 1% chance that there's ET here is probably more than Nick West would give.
I don't know.
We got to press Avi on this tomorrow too. I think it'll be important because I don't think Avi's out there going, I'm 99% sure we're being visited by ETs either, right? I think that what Avi's doing is he's saying, listen, we don't know, and as good scientists, we need to accept that and look for the data and start to put the puzzle pieces together outside of the military-industrial complex. And that's what I love about Avi. And I think Avi kind of baits people sometimes a little bit to get them excited about. He wrote a book called Extraterrestrial, for God's sakes. Like, he loves this shit, right? And so he's interested in getting the people, the money, all of these things together to go study it. And whether or not he actually believes that Oumuamua was ET, or if he has a 99% certainty, I don't know. But what I do know is he's bringing the right people together and he's marketing it in a way that's going to get cash flowing so we can study this thing.
Yeah, exactly. Their beliefs are irrelevant right now, right?
Yes,
like it doesn't matter. They're collecting the data and they're looking at it, and that's more than we could have hoped for a week ago.
Isn't there a parallel between what we talk about, what the government does in terms of UFOs, UAPs, and this? It's like, oh, the government wants to push everything under, or a lot of people have theories now that it's like, well, why is the government talking about UAP? Oh, they want more funding for the military. We've heard that theory.
Crazy. Yeah.
Right. Well, I know this is going to be an unpopular opinion, but let me just toss it out there that this project that Avi has going and tonight's guest, it's like you could say, well, we don't really believe any of this, but if we get some funding going our way, give me, a few dollars over here.
We could study ball lightning.
We can go and we can start. and anybody who follows my work over at the Debrief, I did a long deep dive on ball lightning. It's total garbage. So, as far as we know, all the good information, there is no ball lightning, but you want to study things. But it just does seem to me like the possibility that Harvard is like, wow, we got a great pathway to a whole bunch of funding. And everybody's talking about UFOs. And we want to go do some astronomy research. Let's go study this. And if we come up with something that works for you guys, great. Otherwise, doesn't matter. We're still going to, get telescope time, things like that. That's what I came away with. I do think we're dealing with people, except for Avi, that are skeptics. And Avi, and I've interviewed Avi. You guys have interviewed Avi. You're going to interview him again tomorrow. He's got this whole thing about Oumuamua, which is not impossible in any way, but certainly not proven, and he admits it's not proven, was that a solar sail from another technologically advanced situation or, civilization, something like that. And every time I listen to him, it's like, I'm going to say something I'm sure I'm going to regret, and I'm not going to be on the show tomorrow, so don't worry about it. The dude has a book to sell, okay? Mm-hmm. And I think he definitely believes, and I agree with him, that's one possibility. Could have been a solar sail, you know, some sort of technology. Could have been a really weird rock, you know, really unusual compared to anything we see in our solar system. Mm-hmm. Also very possible. So that's why I'm not coming out and condemning anybody on either side. But the Galileo Project, I'm sort of holding back because I think Avi is very invested in the Oumuamua thing. And tonight's guest is kind of very invested in the, until you actually show me the aliens, there's nothing. But it's a good way to get funding driven. But that doesn't mean I disapprove of it, just to be very clear. Because if they're going to get telescope time, if they're going to get a whole bunch of smart people, you know, just start gathering data. Let's see what shows up later. I think they're all
as long as they're
different points.
Right. I agree with you, Jazz. As long as they're using the money to study UAPs and Oumuamua like objects, as opposed to just like looking at stars, right? As opposed to doing anything like SETI is doing. And I think that would be a huge problem.
Well, he did say that the project, he expected to be more successful than SETI, which I thought was kind of cool, you know, but considering
what's the definition of successful?
Right.
Right.
We found out it was a big rock. On the other end, it's like, oh, there's the Greys. They've been abducting my sister-in-law. You know, it's like, is it somewhere in between those?
Yeah, they're two crazy extremes. Well, here's the one thing I kind of gathered is this looks like, if I could just take a step back, it looks a little bit like science dipping a toe and feeling the water on the UAP topic. They're just like slowly. They haven't even gotten that first toe fully submerged yet, you know? And so we're going to have to be patient, right? I think, honestly, because I think here's what's going to happen, I think. If they really do devote money, time, scientists, eyeballs, equipment, I think eventually they're gonna catch something, or we're gonna be given information from our government, something along the lines of a new gimbal video, but this time from multiple angles, where it's a lot more difficult to just debunk, and they're gonna have to take those data points into their hypothesis now, and they're gonna have to really change. So I would say it's a wonderful thing because now we finally have a group of PhDs, a group of physicists, a group of professors, a group of advisors that are asking the question, and that's all we wanted. That's a baby step in a very, very, very long process. So that's how I'm taking it. Is like I'm looking at it as a dip of the toe and just be patient. They're gonna I think eventually come to this side of the argument where it's like, not only is it possible, but we think it's maybe happening. Like, I think they're gonna get there. It's just gonna take a couple, maybe $100 million to do it, honestly.
What do you make of this comment? Case for Infinity says, I love all these loved UFO as a child, now science man guys. I know, like, for example, both Paul Davies, he was a huge UFO believer as a kid, and so was Mick West even.
Yeah.
And so they've really
by
done
the way,
kind of, what's that?
I was going to say, the discussion between Chris Toledo and Mick West today.
I saw
amazing.
Like 10 minutes of it. How was that?
It was so good. It was so good. I didn't mean to interrupt, but it was so good. I recommend you guys go and check it out because it's a very cordial discussion.
Anything like interesting that came out of it that you would?
Well, here's the thing. Chris Lito removed one of his videos because West was able to disprove it.
And it was the one from the Nimitz incident of the...
I believe, yeah, it was. Yeah. So, rather, what do you got?
But that was like 2 hours late. Like that was like 2 or 3 hours later, right? That video.
Yeah. Well, no, the Nimitz one. They did a great set on that. And Mick was right, and Chris acquiesce.
I mean, I would have liked to seen that they need a moderator for their next debate. They need somebody in the middle there, because what ends up happening is Mick will say something and then Chris will start talking and then Mick mutters something under his breath and you can't equate, but you know it's kind of like, you know, the classic Mick, like, well, you know, there it is, you know, like, and then he'll say something and then it's like, whoa, what'd you say, Mick? And then, you know, he'll be saying a good point, but at the end of this conversation, you know,
Mike, take me backstage for a minute, please.
Yeah, you got it.
Yeah.
It seems like by the end of the conversation that Chris Lito was like, you know, like, this is, what are we looking at here? Like, you know, what do you think we're looking at? Like, because if it's a small plane, if it's a drone, if it's a commercial airliner, we would see that. And first of all, why would we be talking about this if it was any one of those explanations? And just the bottom line is that neither side of this argument has enough data. We need more. And both of them came up, but they had a very wonderful mutual respect for each other. And even Chris Lito at points, a couple points in the conversation was like, man, you really do your homework. Like, you know what you're talking about. And it was just cool. It was a cool conversation. But yeah, I just wanted to throw that in there.
Yeah, and it all comes back to the lack of data, right? Like that was something that Paul Davies said multiple times. He said it was infuriating how lack of a data there was, and I really, you know, took him at his word there. I think he was telling the honest truth there, and yeah, it is infuriating. We need more data, and
Dr. Davies also made an interesting point about the Galileo Project focus and how they were not going to go back and, you know, pick through the Tic Tac event or any other event. And so, and I saw people in the chat who were upset about that. They're like, you're going to look away from, you know, 70 years of history and data. Like, you're just not even going to look at it. And I don't have a good rebuttal for that. But what I will say is they could get lost in the weeds. And if we're actually looking for data that can be proof positive, maybe it is better to stay in the present and focus on what you can capture so that you can put the whole picture together rather than relying on stories and data points that are obfuscated by the military and the government.
I could tell you right now, this UAP UFO topic, let's just say the entire topic is a restaurant, right? The moment you walk into this restaurant, you can tell it's a mess. The kitchen isn't talking to the front of the house. The managers aren't managing properly. The bartenders are making their own concoctions. Like, everybody's on a different page doing their own thing. And so now you've got these group of scientists who are walking into this restaurant looking for a table of 15, and the hostess is nowhere to be found. The manager's nowhere to be found. They're like, okay, let's go find another restaurant. Or start our own damn restaurant. Let's go have a picnic outside and scrap everything else and start from zero. Because they know that the information from zero is going to be collected by them, analyzed by them, cataloged by them. There's no third party. He said, she said. There's no lie detector test. There's no lore or history or baggage or any of that stuff that comes with the 70-year history of this, and they start fresh. And we have to give them that opportunity. We have to. If we want science to come in and talk about this, and you want them here, you want them at this table. We need science at this table. We have to allow them to do it their own way.
Yeah.
We're not going to like it. I'm telling you right now, we're not going to like it.
No, I think you're right. And I think I need to step up my analogy game because you and Rather are on point today.
Well, and you know, to your point, Lou, you know, Paul Davies told us exactly what he needed to be convinced, and that was, you know, quality data from multiple channels. That's the same thing that Mick West asked for, and a lot of these debunkers are asking for, and we don't have that for anything prior to now. We need to go and collect that, and that's going to be new data.
Yeah. Let's go ahead and reset the room, Michael. Remind everyone where they can. But let's tell everybody what's happening this week. I know you don't have a guest yet lined up for Thursday, but we've got an amazing guest tomorrow. We've got some fun folks coming in on Wednesday, and then Friday as well. So.
Absolutely. So if you haven't subscribed to the Unidentified Celebrity Review yet, make sure you do right now. All you got to do is click the subscribe button below. Make sure you smash that thumbs up. And if you want to help us out even more, please share. You can also support Lou in Patreon. All you got to do is click the link below, and you can actually do a monthly donation, $5, $10, $20. If you got the guts, you can donate $500,000 a month.
Yeah,
it's up to you.
Please have the guts.
Have the guts.
Buy a brand new McLaren every month, but just it's my show. We're public access channel, right? Like we're here 5 days a week. We do this show for you guys 5 days a week. We're here. So if you have the capability, support us. We love doing this show for you guys. It takes a ton of work, and it doesn't, it starts with $1, but here's the beautiful thing. Nobody gets a special show. Nobody gets special access. Hacker Man, by the way, we've got the NSA working on Hacker Man. He should be caught very soon. Okay, sometimes leaks happen in the Patreon, and I can't control it because we've been hacked, and it's been a real pain in the ass to get this guy under control. But just know we're on it, okay? Patreon members, thank you so much for not getting upset with me with the little bit of extra access that Hacker Man's been giving you. But just know that everyone gets the same show. We treat everybody as equally as we can because we feel like this information, it's important to get out as soon as we.
How did you find out my name was Hacker Man?
You're Hacker Man.
You guys are good.
I can tell you of all people in the world, I was not expecting Jazz Shaw to be Hacker Man.
I think he's covering for Hacker Man. I think maybe it's George. Maybe it's to George. Is she the Hacker Man? Are you covering for someone?
She's watching right now. Don't get me in any more trouble than I am.
Yeah, I'll say if you don't know what we're talking about, you should go head over to the Patreon and look at the post and find out.
Exactly. All right. Sorry, Michael.
Also, it's okay. It's okay. Make sure you share. Hit the Patreon. Tomorrow we've got Avi Loeb coming on from the Galileo Project from Harvard University. We're gonna have the opportunity to pick his brain and really dig deep into what's happening next. Again, Paul Davies is on the board. Avi Loeb is leading this mission. He is the man. So make sure you follow us over at the Singularity Lab. All you got to do is click the link below. If you are a fan of breaking science, fringe science, if you're a fan of all things interesting and insane, make sure you go follow Rather Be Squidding at his YouTube channel, and make sure you follow Jazz Shaw on Twitter. Only if you're not a normie, because he already has plenty of normies following him. Only if you're not a normie, please follow Jazz Shaw.
Or if you like dolphins.
If you like dolphins.
There you go. And also, real quick, just so you guys know, on Wednesday, we're having Jane Kyle, a.k.a. UFO Jane, friend of the show. She was just on the Discovery Plus show, Roswell, The Final Verdict, which Michael, you have to catch up on. It's actually not bad. It's really good. It's a lot of fun. It's a lot of fun. I'm trying to get, you'll see, once you watch the show, hopefully you can get a couple episodes in before we got Jane on. But I can't wait to talk to Jane about it, because she's a Roswell historian. She's a great mind to pick, and I'm interested to get her take on the show. We had Jason McClellan on last Wednesday to talk about it, and it was a really fun conversation. And then on Friday, we've got from Vice Magazine, Daniel Otis, Canadian researcher and journalist. He's working on a new UAP article. He's going to hopefully give us some little tidbits on what he's working on over there, so that'll be a lot of fun. So don't forget to ring the bell on both channels. Don't forget to subscribe to Singularity Lab, and also the Unidentified Celebrity Review. Share 175 of you guys in here. Smash the like button. Do all that stuff. All right, let's get on with the show, because we have something to talk about here. What are you going to say, Mark? Christopher Mellon. Okay, so Christopher Mellon had another little, I always want to call it a diary entry. I feel like I just picture Christopher Mellon sitting in a library, just be like, "Dear UAP diary," and this is like his internal thoughts. And so he wrote an article on his website, and it was
long.
Essentially, it was very long, very, very long, but worth the read. He was essentially giving advice to Congress on what to be asking for in the future when it comes to the UAP topic. And one quote that I've got here, which I found amazing, and that was, United States Air Force pilots who fears retribution from their chain of command should be able to speak with the task force if they want to. The Air Force's long history of squelching and distorting UAP information is such that any efforts on its part to impede the flow of information on the UAP subject should not be tolerated. Similarly, there are reports that the Air Force OSI agents are trying to squelch the UAP conversations on highly classified communication networks among cleared personnel. Firing or demoting those responsible would be more effective than issuing a memo banning the practice. So he's basically saying that the Air Force is definitely squelching. They're demoting people. They're threatening people. They're threatening people.
That's what he said.
Can I ask one question?
Yeah.
Does anybody here on the panel think that Chris Mellon isn't who he says he is? Because I keep seeing this pop up in places from the heavy debunker community.
Mm-hmm.
Like, well, Chris Mellon was never actually really in charge of anything. Am I the only one who thinks that Chris Mellon, aside from probably even more so than Lou Elizondo, because people have raised questions, obviously, and like John Greenwald's looked into those. We know who Chris Mellon is, right? I mean, is there anybody here who doesn't think that Chris Mellon is who he says he is? Because I've done a lot of digging over the last 4 years, and the dude's credentials just hold up 100%. But don't take it from me. Throw it over to all three of you. Is there any chance that Chris Mellon is just like some sort of psyop, or, oh, I'm just trying to make up things and I'm a disinformation agent? Because I don't see it. But do any of you have any questions about Chris Mellon's credentials? Not saying individual things, about his credentials.
Yeah, I don't have any questions, and TMZ did confirm that he is a Mellon.
There you go.
Who at TMZ confirmed that?
Harvey Levin.
What sort of Mellon was he?
That was awesome. That was perfect. I love a couple of these comments right here. Mellon seems legit, but then someone said Mellon is hacker man. And Mellon is a lobbyist. I mean, I think Christopher Mellon is who he says he is. And until I see documentation or he's caught in a fabrication of something, I'll go ahead and stick with that. Here's what I know is every time he writes an article, Lou Elizondo retweets it, Sean Cahill retweets it, Rogue UAPTF retweets it, and It's Redacted, Jake from It's Redacted retweets it, which is that Sky4 team, essentially.
I was going to say, yeah, that's all the same team.
It's all the same guys, but, I mean, I like to look at because, look, man, people can think whatever they want. We just had Lou Elizondo's dad on this show. And when you hear his father describe what kind of man he raised, it really it brings the question, or I think it puts out the possibility of the psyops theory. Like I really, really do. And maybe I'm wrong on that. Maybe I'll be proven to be wrong. And if I am, I got no problem correcting that.
When you say it puts it out, do you mean enforces psyops or it discounts psyops?
It discounts psyops. It completely discounts it.
All right, then you and I are on the same page.
Yeah. No, I think his father, he wouldn't have his father on, and I don't think his father would say those things if it wasn't so. I mean, not
That'd
to say his father's the
psyops
man.
shit.
That would be some crazy, just over the top deep state stuff. Rather, what do you got to say?
So the main takeaway that I got from all these Chris Mellon tweets was essentially that he's not happy with the impact that these videos and this disclosure has had. And so that kind of concerns me a little bit, actually, that, this hasn't been having the impact. It looks like it's been having a profound impact to me, but if it's not having the impact that they planned, it concerns me that maybe there's not more videos coming. There's not other things coming. They're stuck here saying, hey, we released this stuff. Why aren't you guys reacting like you should be?
No, that's a good point. I think he should know better. He should know that this isn't good enough. I know we've got the eyewitness testimony. I know we've got the videos, but it's not good enough. We just spoke to a scientist, and they're telling you right now, it's not good enough. We need more. And that's why we're doing the big phone home, too, because we're going to try and get more. Congressional hearings, I think, would go a long, long, long way into getting more people excited about this, getting more people to call Congress or their local lawmakers or state representatives. that's where this is going to be successful, I think, is
And
getting
that's
congressional
the focus
hearings.
of the big phone home, too.
That is absolutely 100% the
go.
focus of the big phone home too. Demanding, requesting, however you want to put it, congressional hearings. We need testimony. Yep. We need 4 to 5 days worth of testimony, just like we're going to be doing the big phone home. We're going to be having a day for amateurs, podcasters, enthusiasts to talk about the topic with each other. We're going to have a day on Michael's channel, science-based, where we have scientists, thinkers, philosophers, academics come and talk about this topic and what we could do to move it forward. And then on the last day, we're going to have our military men. We're going to have our high-level officials. Hopefully, I would love to get Christopher Mellon. I would love to get Sean Cahill back for a discussion. Lou Elizondo's already committed. Ideally, I would love to get Marco Rubio on the third day of the big phone home. I want to get senators. I want to get them on the record. I want to ask them the questions that we all want to ask them. Like, this is going to be a 3-day event, and the number one thing we're asking for is congressional hearings. That's number one.
We're going to also have people like, Jake Tapper, Stephen Greenstreet, get people from the mainstream media who have the reach to go and get these people to be accountable. Not saying they have to deliver something confidential they can't deliver, but come on and say, yeah, we need to have this information. We can't tell you what we've seen so far, but we do need to have hearings, and we need to have the media and the government. Big cross-section, which is what Lou did last time. We need to expand that and have people coming on that have a big platform and go, okay, here's where the conversation's going. Right. Let's see what we can talk about. What's legal? What can we drag out? And get that out there. And I think it's absolutely doable.
Yeah, I found, for me, after reading Chris Mellon's blog, or is it we call it a blog? There are 2 things that stood out to me. Number one,
I don't know.
Yeah, his website. Number one is his disdain for government agencies who have huge budgets and are heavily invested, and the leadership, their inability to communicate to one another, their inability to share information, their inability to get over their own fucking egos. Right. Like, that was one of the things, like, that came blazing out of that. And I thought that was...
The last couple of blog posts have been just fire. He's just been setting fire to the entire structure of things because it's infuriating. And I've been saying for a couple of years that him and Elizondo specifically have been screaming at the top of their lungs for the intelligence community to pay attention to this. And he actually wrote that down in the blog. He's like, we've been screaming at the top of our lungs, and it's like nobody's paying attention. And it's dangerous. Yeah. It's dangerous to ignore this issue because it's a flight concern.
Absolutely. And Elizondo's been pointing this out forever. When he went to try to push this up through the Pentagon, he gets blocked at every level. I mean, imagine if, the FBI's got data. Imagine if the CIA's got data. Imagine if the Air Force has data. If all these agencies have all this data that they can't put together and they can't collaborate on, and we're spending all of this money to fund all of these government agencies. And that was the other thing that he pointed out. He said, we don't need more money. We need real leadership. We need for these folks to take their egos and throw them in the fucking lake and really be a leader in this topic and across the board when it comes to transparency and communication across different branches of the government. And he's absolutely right.
Well, not even so much people. He said, and I'm going to read right from the article. He said, how thorough were the services in gathering data for the task force? Did anyone touch base with the global infrasonic detection system, which can detect meteors and rockets to see if or how often they track UAP? What about AWACs, units for or AWACS, as I think it's going to be pronounced. What about AWACS units for the space fence? Space fence? I was like, what the hell is the space fence? And then he wrote, or the mobile X-band radar, etc. They're like, he's naming these intelligence data gathering systems. Yeah, I feel like this guy's over it. He's just like, this is bullshit. Like, you guys need to use, like, why are we, Congress, why are we not asking for this?
Yeah, and if he actually, you know, as Levin pointed out on TMZ, he is a melon. He's got money. And they asked him, they're like, "Why are you willing to come on stage?" He's like, "Well, you know, I'm not trying to get a government contract. I don't need it." Right. And so the people that can't be bought are the people that, you know, could actually speak the truth. Right. And so, you know, I always want to be careful because you never know what people are really after. But at the same time, he seems to be a guy that doesn't need the cash. And if he doesn't need the cash and you see him blowing up like this and you see him calling out the government for everything all of us see every single day, there's some value there.
I agree.
Goes back to the 90s, really. I mean, it's not like he was ever poor, but he's very well set up now. But yeah, I mean, he's been consistent. If we've had, I'm not going to name any names, but we've had other people in the ufology community who have gone out and made big names for themselves, and they want to say, "Oh, well, this happened and this happened." Chris Mellon is not somebody who ever went out and said, "Well, now I have this CE5 or whatever it is, you know, thing, and I'm selling this or I'm doing this." The dude's just been out there banging on the doors like the barbarians trying to knock down the gates.
I think you're right.
He's never done anything. So I'm not saying he's infallible, but just everybody, I would say Chris Mellon has more credibility on that front than most of the people involved, aside from Lou Elizondo, because neither of them, the stuff Lou Elizondo has done has trashed his life. You know, it's just, you know, he wiped out a really good career. You know, him and Mellon, I look at the two of them and I'm like, wow, if you guys are lying, this is one of the best scams ever, because it looks like you just screwed yourselves over.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. Well, and I don't want to
Am I wrong here?
No,
well,
but I don't want to put them in the same exact boat either. I don't want to put Elizondo and Mellon in the same exact boat, but I definitely get your point, Jazz.
Well, and they could be both telling the truth, but they could still be both wrong. Like they could still,
Yeah,
that's true. Rather, what did you pull from this article? What did you gather from it? Like, what was your thoughts?
Yeah, that's just that Chris Mellon is upset about the impact. You know, he tried to do, he ruined his career, did a lot of this stuff, and he sees the Air Force stopping investigations and stuff like that. I think he's pissed off.
Yeah. Well, shit, man. I mean, yeah, he's a sucker.
No, shocker.
Oh, shocker. Okay. You know, he did mention, you know, Avi Loeb, you know, and how he supports a lot of his recommendations. I mean, dude, there's so much we could already be doing that doesn't need a budget. That it just needs a flow of information. It just needs a place to go where it doesn't get hung up. And God damn, I'm waiting for this IG investigation or inspection, because if we find out, you know, OSI or you know, I have a feeling it's part of the Air Force, man. Like the Air Force, he's really calling out the Air Force on this, and it's like, why are Navy pilots allowed to talk, report, and discuss this, but Air Force pilots are not encouraged, or they're even demoted and ostracized? What's going on here? Why is there this conflict between these two divisions that work really closely with each other? If I'm not mistaken, right? Army or Air Force and Navy are they're tied at the hip. A lot of these, you know, military institutions are, but those two specifically.
The Air Force community is very, very different. I'm about to get in a lot of trouble because my wife is watching this. I'm not going to name anybody, people in my family who worked for, going back to the 70s and all the way through with the Air Force and with like Wright-Patterson and other areas, you know, and the secrecy was just really sinister, in my opinion. and people that probably know things. I personally know somebody I can't name who probably knows a lot of stuff about this. And every time we sit and talk and have a few beers, he says a few things and then he just stops. You know, and it's like there's a very, because I was in the Navy, you know, and he was in the Air Force, and it's like they're very different cultures, and I think there's a lot more openness with the Navy, and we've seen that, and that's carried through into the OSAP ATIP generation of the amount of, you know, information you get, and the Air Force has been just mute. You know, there's nothing comes out of anybody, and they've all known you don't talk about any of this, you know. So that's my take on it. So take that for what you will.
Yeah, just a little bit of color. You know, my grandfather was a pilot with the Air Force. My dad was a pilot with the Navy, and they always had a little bit of contention with the different branches of service. So I think that they're, you know, someone said here they're like a divorced couple, the Air Force and the Navy.
Sure.
There probably is something to that.
No, that definitely sounds accurate. Okay, so we're about almost done with this show, and what I wanted to do real quick before we ended. First of all, we've got a poll. Let me bring up. Let me end the poll and see where it's at. Okay, so today's question was: Did today's Galileo Project blind you with science? 44% of the audience said yes. 33% said no. 23% said I'm more of a Devo fan. Whip it. So excellent. Love that poll. Yeah. Love that poll. Okay, so the next thing I wanted to talk about real quick, let me just share a screen here because we're going to talk about UFO video of the day. I thought this was fun. This actually happened last week. I thought this was one of the worst things I'd ever seen in my life, but for some reason people just absolutely went bonkers for it on Twitter. There's sound to it, but I can't play the sound right now. It's just basically you just hear tanks and music, like military music in the background. There's nobody talking.
What's on those? Not just in the air, but what's on those tanks?
Okay, so they're robots. Okay, this is supposed to be a North Korean military parade with and it's told everything you see here is CGI. Everything green, anything flying is 100% CGI. And there was a lot of folks were like, what happened? Like this is North Korea? Like people were really like concerned. I'm like, what? No, North Korea does not have flying drones or objects like that. Look at that. They look like fans in the sky. Like it's insane. Like anybody thought that this was real. What? What is that?
It's obviously real. It's obviously real.
Why is it obviously real?
I can see the edges around. It's obviously CGI. But they could have like flying dogs or something, you know. Jesus. Don't be racist against the Koreans.
I agree that the robots look like the robot from Big Hero 6.
Yeah.
That's it.
They do look a little. They also look a little like anime-ish. There's like a lot of
no, it's not even good CGI.
like space anime.
Did this come from North Korean media, or is it a...
No, it did not come from North Korean media. It came from a guy on Twitter that just started like sharing it, and I thought it was hilarious because everybody was like, "Oh my God, the North Koreans are gonna kill us!" Like, no, they're not. Like it's
it was from Twitter.
Yeah.
Oh,
so
well,
you know it's true.
Much less scared now.
Okay, then I'm totally on board.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, I just thought that was a fun thing that I wanted to share today. And okay, so hold on real quick. Let me do this. All right, let's say goodbye to everybody, Michael. Shall we?
We shall. For those of you who are not graced to be following this person, make sure you follow Jazz Shaw. I know he always says don't follow him, but you know you might want to know you might want to know something cool is going down, and Jazz can help you out. Jazz is a writer and editor for The Debrief, as well as Salem Media. Jazz, it's always a pleasure having you. Have a lovely day, my friend.
On Thursday, everybody tune in a couple of days from now. I have finally the 4,000 word definitive explanation of the UAP dolphin theory. Coming out on Thursday. Tune in for that. I'll be promoting it. Follow me at Jash on Twitter, and I will explain the entire thing.
Please tell me you're being serious.
No, I am being serious.
What can you tell us?
No,
what?
I already submitted it, and the debrief already accepted it.
So it's gonna go on the debrief. Oh my god!
It's gonna be on the debrief on Thursday. I have the entire UFO dolphin theory on the debrief.
Oh my god!
On Thursday morning. Tune in.
Oh man!
And you're going to be a believer.
Michael, I think you know you're going to have to bring on the show Thursday, right?
Well, we're gonna have to bring Jazz on because I actually did get a guest. I'm not ready to release it yet, but I definitely would love if Jazz would be down to come on the show on Thursday. We'd love to have him talk about that.
Oh, I will be there.
All right,
I will be there.
Excellent.
Oh hell yes, Jazz. That's
Hell
all
yeah.
Mysteries answered.
Well, then we'll see you on Thursday, sir.
All right, we'll see you on Thursday, Jazz.
Ciao. Oh my god. Oh my god, that's awesome. That's awesome.
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, make sure if you love science, if you love technology, if you love a healthy dose of skepticism, make sure you go check out Rather Be Squidding on YouTube. Rather, what's your Twitter handle again?
At Be Squidding.
Make sure you go check them out.
Subscribe at YouTube.
Rather, have you gotten do you have your new topic for the new video yet?
Yeah, I'm going to be exploring Marvel comics and some of the origins to the things like Wakanda and the crypto-terrestrial theories. It's some interesting stuff.
Man, that's kind of one thing I wanted to talk to Miss Dr. Davies about was this Wakanda theory. I feel like he kind of poo-pooed it pretty quickly.
Oh, yeah. He ain't going for it.
He ain't going for it. We're not there yet. Again, we're just dipping the science, though. The science, though, has been dipped.
We'll get data. And we'll see where that goes, right?
Oh, my God, man. Can you imagine the day these guys are like, okay, the Wakanda theory might make a little sense. Like, holy shit. I would love it.
Loeb plays my games. Like, when I bring it up to Loeb, he's like, well, yeah, we got to leave it on the table, so.
Well, I can't wait to talk to Loeb tomorrow because I'm going to be throwing all sorts of questions at him. All right, Rather. Well, thanks for being here, buddy. We always appreciate your help, support, love, and
who was the dude?
Smile
Rather?
worth $1 million.
Harvey Lev.
Great. That was great.
Dude, you're getting really good with that joke. You're getting really good with that joke. I've been a bit rusty here the last week, but like that was good. That was good.
You've been through it. You've had a horrible week, bro, and I'm so sorry. Like I wasn't here to support you. I know you've just been through so much, and my God, man, my love to you and Michelle. You guys are amazing, and I'm so sorry. To just give her all of our love.
Well, the good news is, quick update on Michelle. She's probably got to pee, and I got to go help her here in a minute. But she's doing a lot better than she was on Monday. That's for sure.
Good.
She's walking better. She's walking with a walker. You know, it's like 80-year-old walking, but it's way better than it was on Monday, which was almost no walking at all, or insanely painful walking. She's got proper medications. We're gonna go see her doctor tomorrow, so things are looking up. It's good. All things are getting better. But yeah, it's been a hell of a week. But we had everybody here who helped support. We had you guys out there. We had an amazing audience. We had amazing co-guests and stars. We had Carl Vibe jump in, Rather jumped in, Daniel. Why am I forgetting Daniel's last name right now? The best looking guy on UFO Twitter.
Oh, Daniel Miller.
Miller. But yeah, so with all of that, you guys want to say thank you to our guest today, Mr. Dr. Paul Davies out of the Arizona State University. I hope to have him back on. Like I said, we're going to be doing a science day devoted on Michael's channel, the Singularity Lab for the Big Phone Home. It's going to be all day science. It's going to be a lot of fun. You guys should subscribe, ring the bell, share the channel, all of those things so you don't miss any of the developments that are going to be coming up. We're going to be having details. The Big Phone Home, we're almost, I don't want to say it, but we're close. We're real close. But yeah, it's going to be an awesome event, and I cannot wait to give you guys all the details. We're going to do a whole show devoted to it. And yeah, I want to say thank you to the sponsors, BlueMarlinChronicles.com. I want to say thank you to DOS Tapes. They provide all of the tunes that you hear in the show. Their sound or their Bandcamp link is in the description below. Michael's links are in the description below. Rather's links are in the description below. The Galileo Project, their link is also in the description below. So if you want to go go learn more about that, please do. With all of that said, you guys, thank you so damn much for coming aboard and getting weird with us here on another episode of the Unidentified Celebrity Review, your home for credible news, reviews, and commentary on everything UAP and UFOs. My name's Luis Jimenez. That is Michael Mataluni. Until next week, you guys, stay safe out there. Peace. Real quick, Michael. Let's see, because you've got control of this, right? Can we exit the room at the exact same time?
Ooh, you want to try?
Let's try. All right, you ready? 1, 2, 3. It was close. It was almost there.
It was there. We had it.
Yeah,
1, 2, 3.
That one worked. That one worked. Okay, so we gotta try and do that now every show. All right, later.
How are we gonna do it? How are we gonna do it without counting out loud, though?
Yeah, but see, if I do that, I can't click it.
Or we could do this. We could go, you go, and that is Michael Mataluni. I can go like this, and as soon as I hit that, then we both out.
Okay. All right. Will we remember it on Tuesday? Oh, wait.
Will we remember it right
One more
now?
time. One more time. Yeah, I did it. We'll get it right. All right, you guys. Thank you for being here. We love you. Peace.
Somebody's fantasy, a worldwide ecstasy.